All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Colton Ogden. This is CS50 on Twitch, and I am joined by
Kareem Zidane. Hello, everyone.
So Kareem and I did a stream was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
On GitHub and Git, where we talked about what is GitHub, how do you actually use it, how do you use it on your local machine, how do you then tie that into a repository on GitHub, which is sort of the first part of the equation for a lot of modern development. But what are we going to talk about today that sort of extends that?
Today we are going to talk about two very important concepts or terms in the DevOps world, namely continuous integration and continuous deployment, otherwise known as CI/CD. And just because of the context, we are also going to be talking about a little bit of testing techniques.
Sure. Yeah. Very important things. Obviously, as you're developing applications beyond just toy applications, getting into actually a business setting, or even CS50 type, a lot of CS50's apps and infrastructure is all sort of based around this idea of continuously deploying, testing, and integrating your apps onto their respective platforms.
That's true. So last time we actually talked about Git and GitHub, as you mentioned, and we talked about the idea that these tools are very, very useful because we developers tend to make changes all the time. And so it's nice to keep track of these changes and be able to, toggle between or switch between them later on. Today we're going to extend that by means of being able to ensure that our changes don't break our projects or anything that we have in our project already. And we're also going to be able to automatically maybe publish our project or deploy our project to several targets. If it's a website, for example, we can deploy this to Amazon or to Heroku, or if it's a Python package, we can deploy this to PyPy and so on.
Yeah, because obviously if we're deploying our website, we make changes and we push them, we want to make sure that they don't break.
Sure.
The irony being that Facebook is currently at 503, which is funny, which we just saw earlier. So let's see what we have in the chat today. We have a few people in the chat. We have ForkDB, which I'm not sure if we saw you before on a previous stream. Rahul Nag, Bella Kiers is a regular. Sashikant32 says hello. M. Kloppenberg says, hey everybody. M. Kloppenberg is a regular. And Maj Jafat says hi. What is this session about? And the session is going to be about CI/CD. So what's the first big topic that we want to bite off today?
Okay, do you want to switch to my...
Yeah, let's do that. So let's bring up Kareem's screen here.
All right, so here's my terminal, and I'm going to start by writing my own sort of simple math library that has one function, and this function is going to test if an integer, a number, a positive integer, or non-negative integer is prime or not.
Okay.
And if you don't recall, a prime number is a number that's only divisible by itself and the one only. So yeah, let's try to get started. So I'm going to open a new file here, call it mymathlib.py.
Okay.
And I'm going to define a Python function called isPrime that takes in one argument, n. And then inside of that function, what I'm going to do is try to check if a number is prime or not. Now, mathematically, if a number is not prime, it has to have a factor that's less than or equal to its square root.
Okay.
Right? So, I mean, you should probably trust me on that, but the mathematical proof for this is pretty simple. We're not really going to go through it right now.
Yeah, you can't divide something by something larger than half of itself, right?
You can divide something by something half of
That's
itself.
why we take the square root, because we can't find a factor that's larger than its half.
Okay. I'm gonna I'm not sure I get that totally, but I'm gonna trust you on this as well.
That's the way I understand it. So.
All right. Sure. So we can start by iterating through the numbers from I up to n, including the square root of n, which is the number that we're trying to figure out what's prime or not.
So
here.
from 1 until half of, like say 20, it would be not half the square root in that case. So it would be like.
Yep.
4 point something.
That's why I was puzzled when you said half of half, because
there was another algorithm I thought where they checked up to half of it, but I guess the square root makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So we better not divide by 0. We better not divide by 1. So we're going to start by dividing by 2, and then go up to the square root of n, which I believe is going to be in math, right? Import math.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, we're going to figure this out if it doesn't work. So square root of math.
We got a couple messages in the chat too. It says, Rahul Nag, I can't properly stream because there's some buffering problem, maybe network poor on 1080p. Yeah, possibly. Try, if there's an option, try downgrading the quality. ForkDB says, I'm here for the first time, and Rahul Nag says that they're there for the first time as well. So thanks so much for joining us for the first time.
Yeah.
As we dive into CI/CD, definitely check out our prior streams and the GitHub stream if curious. Nuwanda3333, Astley says, oh, that is so cool. Kareem the Dream. We have a game between my friends to guess if a number is prime or not. Next time I will cheat using this. Yeah, definitely the cheaty way to go.
All right, sounds great. Yeah. All right, so let's move on. So now we're looping through the numbers, starting with 2 up to and including presumably the square root of n in this case. And what we're going to do is check if n is divisible by I, in which case n remainder I is going to be equal to 0. In this case, we're going to return false, right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, return true. How does that sound to you?
Sounds good.
All right, so let's actually test this out. How would you test this out?
I'd probably run it on a sequence of numbers that I've predetermined have a certain set of numbers that I know are prime versus a set of numbers that I know are not prime.
Exactly. So I just fired up a Python interpreter here. I'm going to import my function. So from my mathlib import is prime. Now I have is prime in scope. So I'm just going to try to call it a bunch of numbers. So for example, 0. Whoa. Okay. What's happening here?
So is prime float object cannot be interpreted as an integer? So
yep. That's probably because the square root function returns a float, and this expects an integer.
Yeah.
Yep. So let's do this. Let's switch it to an integer. Okay, let's try again. Import is prime from the other way around? From my mathlib. Import is prime. And then try again, is prime of 0. True. That's weird.
Okay, interesting. So
okay.
did we not special case as 0 perhaps? Is there a...
Yeah, there seems to be a problem here. Well, it's saying that 0 is prime, 1 is prime, 2 is prime, 3 is prime, 4, 5, okay. Is it 4 prime? Well, it seems to be buggy. So the first thing that it's a good practice. The first thing that we should do when we find a bug like this in our program is actually pinpoint this bug. Or in other words, you could imagine every time I do something or try to fix a bug or add a feature that I open up a Python interpreter like this, or and keep trying things like this. This is not really very time efficient, because I'm gonna be doing this again and again, and this seems to be like a computer's problem, right?
So you can maybe do what you just did in the loop or something in a script and just run your program over a bunch of them instead of manually typing them out, maybe?
Yeah, I could definitely write a program that would test these automatically for me. Luckily, though, the Python has actually a testing framework called UnitTest that we could actually use. So this stream is not really about UnitTest itself, but we're going to be exploring a bit of its features. Hopefully, we'll explain the ones that we use while we're going through them, so that they're clear to everyone. So let's actually try this. So in another file, I'm going to call tests.py. All I need to do to use UnitTest is import UnitTest like this, and then create a class called, I'm going to call it, in this case, try to be descriptive, is prime tests, because I'm testing my isPrime function. And this class is going to extend UnitTest.testCase. And by extend, this is actually an object-oriented programming concept. It basically means use features from the class UnitTest.testCase in this case.
Basically make a new class called isPrimeTests, which takes all of the behavior of test case in this case.
Correct. It's exactly that. Yeah, it's based on UnitTest.testCase in this case, which is another class defined in the UnitTest library.
Belakir says that my audio is a little low. I just changed the sensitivity. Is Is it still a little bit too low? It does look like the audio levels are a bit low on it. Hold on, let me try. Whoops. Is that any better? Are we getting a little bit? We're getting a little bit closer. I'm not sure why it's so low. Test 1, 2, 3. Sorry. My mic says it's at a good sensitivity level. I'm not sure. How's that? Is that any better? Oh, now it's in the red. Okay. Cool, cool. And then Gulyash says, hello, everybody. Hello, Gulyash. Thanks for joining. Rahul Nag says that he's having some issues with the resolution. We only stream up to 1080p, so I'm not sure if maybe Twitch does on-the-fly encoding of the video to 720. If you have, I would have imagined that they have a streaming option. I think if I click on this, let me see, advanced. No.
Is it quality? Quality maybe.
Where do they have that? Oh, quality auto. Oh yeah, they only have. It looks like they only first give you the 1080 option. I'm not sure if they do the. I think they do the encoding later, such that you could watch the VOD at 720. The video will be up on YouTube for sure later, and it will be at. It'll have 720, 360, all sorts of different options. Sorry that it's having a little bit of a bandwidth issue at the moment. For Sunlight says hello for Sunlight, good to have you with us again. And then ForkDB says your stream is flawless. Thanks ForkDB, much appreciated. Here we have that over here.
All right, sounds good.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. Go ahead, continue.
Okay, so I have my class. I'm gonna use this class in a moment, but let's first add something. If name equals main, run unit test.main. Right?
Okay.
So what this does is it says, if I run this script, which is called test.py that we just created, from the command line, like I do python space test.py, then run this script, run the code in the main function.
This is kind of where you'll have what you were doing before, manually iterating through the different isPrime function calls manually at the CLI.
Yeah, kind of. Okay, so how do we add a test case with Python's UnitTest? So it turns out that any function that starts with a keyword test is actually considered to be a test by default. So in this case, I'm going to define a new function called test0, and this function is going to take one argument, self, because annoyingly that's how Python works. It needs a self argument if you're defining a method inside of a class. If you're not familiar with this, perhaps maybe learn a little bit more about object-oriented programming in Python.
We could maybe do a stream about it in the future.
Yeah, maybe. But for now, yeah, let's take it for granted that self needs to be there at least. And it turns out that UnitTest actually has a bunch of built-in functions that we could use for testing our stuff. So we could use certain functions to test if something is equal to something else, or if something is true, or if something is false, and so on. And so in this case, we're going to do exactly that. So we're going to say self.assert false, because we expect that 0, when passed to isPrime, returns false, right? So we're going to assert that false of isPrime 0. Now, isPrime is not really defined anywhere here, so I'm going to just import it like I did before.
Right.
So I'm going to do from mymathlib import isPrime.
Somebody in the chat says, Major Jafats, is there a typo in the parent class name?
Yep, that's correct. It should be test case, not test cast.
Thanks for that, Major Jafat.
Thank you so much.
Gulyash74 says maybe test case, and then Linz Potiguara says unit test.
Yes.
Yeah.
See, unit testing is actually a testing technique that's very, very popular and very used in a lot of projects. And it also is support, like a lot of languages actually have built-in unit test libraries or frameworks. And unit testing is basically the idea of dividing your program or library or your software in general into units, like modular units that you're able to test each of them separately. So this is the basic idea of what a unit test is.
So like modularizing the testing of our program.
Correct, yeah. Yeah, basically splitting your program into testable units and then testing these.
Nasquito says hi. Hi, Nasquito. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thank you. All right, so let's move on. So the way to run this is, by the way, I'm using a text editor called Vim in this case, but you're free to use whatever you want. You don't have to use this.
Your Vim looks nice. Your Vim actually looks like VS Code almost, or like a modern editor. Some Vim setups look a little bit more arcane.
I know you're a big fan of VS Code. I haven't used it, unfortunately, but yeah, you can use VS Code, you can use Atom, you can use any number of text editors.
Your vimrc is nice.
Thank you so much. All right, it's not mine, actually. I downloaded it from somewhere. All right, so the way to run these tests would be by running Python test.py. And as expected, I see a bunch of weird output here. Namely, I see an F on the top left corner, and this indicates that a test has failed. And a test can, I think, do or be in one of three states. It can pass, in which case it would show a dot, and we'll see an example of that. It can error, in which case there might be a syntax error in your code, or it can fail, in which we got a result, but the result is not the one that we expect it to be. So in this case, we passed is0 to we passed prime to is we passed 0 to is prime, and we got true, but we're expecting false, which is indicated by assertion error right here. So it tells us that true is not false.
And that's why we got the F, because we asserted false.
Correct, exactly. So how do you fix this? Let's go back to our code. Now that we pinpointed the bug that we have with the test case, and this is just to ensure that this bug never happens again once we fix it. So no matter who changes our code later on, we're going to run these tests every time, and if they fail, then there's something wrong. So how do you propose fixing this bug?
Well, I see that you're returning false immediately at the first time. Well, okay, so let's see. For I in the range of 2 to that number. So the problem is that it's going to start at 2.
Right.
Does it start? Right? Yeah, it's inclusive, right? So it'll start at 2, and so it doesn't account for the case of 0 or 1.
Right. So that's exactly right. So I'm gonna, check if n is less than 2 initially, and then return what? False immediately.
You're gonna want to return false, yeah.
So once again, for those of you who didn't follow, we are essentially checking if n initially is less than 2, in which case we say, this is not prime, and we return false immediately. Otherwise, we continue and do our check. So there's one more bug here, but let's make sure that our test passes first, right? So let's do Python test.py again, and our test passed.
Nice.
All right. And so let's suppose like I wrote a program that depends on my library, or I'm testing stuff again randomly, and I happen to find another bug. So let's do this again. So from mymathlib import is prime, and do is prime. I'm doing a bunch of stuff. 1, okay, works as expected. 2, it's prime. All right. 3 is prime. 4 is prime. No, it's not.
I don't think 4 is prime.
All right. So the first thing that we should do again is pinpoint the bug. So we're going to add another test function here again. Do test for example, self.assert false is prime of 4.
Okay.
Right? Now we're going to run the tests again just to see them failing first. As you can see, there's an F and a dot. As we mentioned, the dot.
So just write it all in one long string,
exactly.
Basically?
Yeah, we're referring to the very first line here in the output. So the F indicates that one test failed.
So you want to see a long string of dots.
Exactly. You always want to see dots. If you're not seeing dots, there's something wrong. And a dot means the test succeeded or passed in this case.
Okay.
And it's telling us, again, that true is not false, and it's telling us that this is on test.py line 11. If I open this, I'll find the self.assert false is prime 4.
Okay.
Line. All right, so the bug actually, I'm not going to put you on the spot again, but the bug actually is, if we open our code again, is that actually the second argument to range is not included in the range.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't include the square root.
So you have to add 1 to it.
Exactly, so we have to add 1 to it. So in this case, we're going to add 1 to this. And hopefully, if we didn't do anything wrong, run the test again, they pass.
Nice.
All good. All right, so we can keep doing this. We can keep using our program. We can keep playing with it and trying to figure out if there are bugs or not. One thing that's probably worth mentioning, though, is that a function like isPrime can take any number of, like an infinite number of inputs. So it's not really something like practical that we would expect to write an infinite number of test cases, because that's practically not possible, right? So in cases like these, we would always try to choose inputs that are representative in this case.
Yeah.
So try to crash our program, in other words. So I would try -1 for a negative number, -2 for a number that would have been prime if it was positive. A square root that's even, a square root that's odd, and so on. So I try to write a bunch of test cases that represent different kinds of inputs and test my programs on. That's pretty much the best that I can do.
Corner cases and sample, like normal samples points. Basically.
Exactly. I believe I have a few test cases here in, let's see. Let's move this tests to original, to tests1.py. So I've written in advance a bunch of test cases, testing 0, testing 1. Notice here I'm testing that 2 is prime, so self did assert true in this case, not assert false, because I expect the return value true in this case. Same thing for 3, 4 is false, testing an 8, testing a 9, which is, sounds like a prime number, but it's actually not. So yeah, a bunch of good test cases. I'm just going to try to run these again, and they all ran as expected and succeeded.
Victory.
All right.
For Sunlight says, can we test our random number generators this way?
I'm not sure what you mean.
The way, I guess some way that I would interpret that is testing to make sure the random number generator actually generates like a even distribution of random numbers, maybe. So like sort of normalizing a distribution of 1,000 random numbers. But aside from that, I can't think of any other use cases off the top of my head, if that's what you were referring to for Sunlight.
Yeah, please elaborate if that's not, if that doesn't answer your question. Maybe you can look into that. But any other questions on test cases, the test cases that we wrote, or the code in general?
First of all, I said, yes, exactly. You're a great interpreter. Thank you very much.
Okay, awesome.
Very kind of you.
All right. So it's still kind of painful, though, to have to write the test step manually, or have to run the test step manually every time we make a change to our code, right? So this is what actually CI, or continuous integration, solves for us. Continuous integration will allow us to automatically run these tests once we push our code to GitHub, in this case. Some of you might be wondering, is there a way to run these tests locally before committing even? Yes. As far as I know, I haven't used them before, but there's something called Git hooks that you could use to essentially run a script, or in this case, like our test.py script, to actually do something before committing, or do something when various events happen. So the first thing that we need to do is actually, we're going to be using a service called Travis CI today. And Travis CI is a continuous integration and continuous deployment service that you can log into using your GitHub account. So I'm logged in already here. And once you log into Travis CI, you're essentially authorizing them to read or write to some or all of your repositories on GitHub. Do you have a question?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm just looking at the. I have the. I'm basically following along with you, but I'm reading your.
Let me actually zoom this a little bit. Maybe this is not readable at all. So, if I go to profile, for example, after logging in, if I go to profile / my username, I should see a listing of my repositories that I have.
Airline, is that Airline 0?
These are from Brian's whip course.
Okay.
We gave a course in this summer with Doug. He was teaching the course.
Okay.
So we were using these. Okay, so in this case, I have a new repository called CI/CD stream in my GitHub, and what I'm going to do is actually, first of all, git init this, and then add.
Throw it back to our prior stream. If anybody wants to know how Git works.
Yep. I actually planned to do this beforehand, but I forgot. But let's add this new remote. So I'm just linking my local folder, my local repository to the GitHub one that I just created. So I'm gonna do add the remote repository, which is called CI/CD stream.git. Okay, now I see all these files. Let me rename tests1.py, which is the more complete one, to test.py, because I don't need this anymore. So now my test.py looks like this, which is the one that has a few more test cases. Let me actually ignore as well. So let's ignore the PyCache one because I don't need it. So I'm gonna echo PyCache to .git ignore.
Looks like Guliar74 has a question for you as well.
Okay, so I skipped the beginning in Selenium. The beginning of the terminal line. Okay, that's it. Yeah, let me reread this because I read it in my head and skipped. I skipped the beginning. Is Selenium at the beginning of the line in the terminal of name of your virtual env, or does it somehow appear when you use Selenium? So this is, yes, as you expected, this is a virtual environment. We are going to be using Selenium later at the end of this stream. I should have deactivated this to avoid distraction. So let me do this now. But yes, Selenium is a virtual environment. So let me get out of this virtual environment. Now there's no Selenium. This never happened. So let me do git status again. I have all these files. Let me actually ignore a couple more files. So let me ignore mymathlib.py.original, which is one that I wrote beforehand, just in case I forgot anything. Okay, I have the files that I care about. I'm going to add all the files that I have, git status again, confirm that they are in my staging area, my index, and then do a git commit, say this is my first commit, and then git push. And of course, it's asking me where to push to. And I'm going to say push to the master branch on GitHub, and also track this local repository, or track this remote, track this remote branch with my local branch in this case, which is also called master. So I'm going to do this. Now, if I reload the page, I should see my code. All great. So how do we tell Travis CI to run our tests automatically once we push? If we look at the Travis CI documentation, we are going to find that to get started, we need to create a file in our repository, in the root of our repository, the top level of it, called .travis.yml. So let's do that. .travis.yml, creating a new file, right? And .yml actually stands for YAML, which is a configuration language, or a language that's often used for configuration. It's very similar in spirit to JSON, if you're familiar. I think it's more human readable, and I think supports more fancy stuff than JSON as well. So it's just going to be a bunch of key value pairs that have a certain hierarchy.
I sort of think of it as like the Python version of JSON, almost.
Yeah, kind of.
It reminds me of if Python made its own version of JSON.
Yeah, I think Python does use a configuration language. I'm not sure what it's called though. There's a really popular format with Python applications. Anyway, we're not going to go into this for now. But to get started, we need to say what the language that we use in our project is. In this case, language is Python. And we can optionally specify also which version of Python. I'm just going to be using Python 3.6, but you're free to use something else or even more than one version of Python. And there are two key steps in this case. One of them is install. And the install step is responsible for essentially installing your application itself, if it's installable, right? So in this case, if I'm creating a Python package, for example, I would do pip install, my package name, or pip install dot to install the current directory. In this case, I don't really have anything to install yet, so I'm just going to skip this and say true. I don't need to do anything. The second key step is the script step. And the script step is going to be the one or more commands that we need to run in order to test our program. So do you recall what this command was?
Python test.py, right?
Yep, tests.py. All right, so this is how we tell Travis, hey Travis, once our code is pushed to master, in this case, run python test.py first. And either, if the build succeeds or if the tests succeed, make the build succeed. Otherwise, make the build fail. So we actually didn't demonstrate something, so let me go back for a bit. This is, by the way, I think this is the minimal that we need in this case. So all good, a bunch of key value pairs. First of all, we specify the language as Python. We specify the Python version, which is 3.6 in this case. We say that we don't need to install anything. We don't need to install our package because it's not really installable in this case. And we run the tests this way by running literally python test.py. You have a question?
Yeah, Major Jafat says, what advantage do we get from having the code tested online after pushing and not locally?
We could have it tested locally as well. Most people, so the typical use case for this is that you would be working on a separate branch. So you would be fixing a bug or adding a feature or refactoring something on a separate branch. And the ideal case for this would be to do whatever you want on this branch, always push frequently to sync up the state of your GitHub repository with your local repository, just in case you want to fetch this somewhere else, or or something happened to your local code, so you have a copy on GitHub. And then you can actually have Travis test on this branch before actually merging into master. So master is usually always should be in a reasonably good state, right? So we should never merge like half, the amount of changes into master, or know that something is broken, but still merge it into master. So the idea would be to separate these into two separate branches, commit and push on my separate branch as many times as I want, have the tests run automatically, and you can actually make GitHub force the case that only when the tests pass on this branch, merge it into master.
And so we can also deterministically ensure that we are testing if we have it automated.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so this is also one other thing. I'm not quite sure about how Git hooks work, but suppose you and I are working on the same repository right now, right? I have a bunch of Git hooks that run the tests automatically, but you don't. So this is some sort of way to enforce that the tests are run for everyone. Another advantages of running the tests online is the unified environment, right? So when we run all these tests on Travis, all the tests are literally only run in the Travis environment and not Colton's environment or Kareem's environment, which might be different in this case.
True.
So we want to make sure that the tests work in the Travis environment, which is ideally going to be the same as our production environment, whatever that is.
Makes sense.
All right, I hope that answered your question. And I think that's all what we need to do in this case. The thing that I forgot to show earlier was that if we run python test.py again, if all the tests succeed.
Actually, I see 7 dots there, so.
Exactly, yeah. So this is how we print the exit code of the previous command. So if we check the exit code of the previous command, this is going to be 0, which by convention means that the previous command ran successfully, right? If we break our program again, let's actually remove this for now, right? And then try to break it again. We see a bunch of errors. I think if we print the exit code again right now, it's going to say something that's other than 0 in this case, 1, which means the command failed.
And the question mark $sign variable, that's the last return code.
Yes.
Given to the shell.
Yes. This is an environment variable. If you're not familiar, that automatically for us stores the exit code of the previous command.
Nice. Looks like Fungus Torba is tossing the Bob Ross emoji there, so thanks for that. Major Jafat says, works on my machine, and yeah, it is clear now. Thanks.
Yep. That's a real concern. The tests work on my machine, but don't work on Colton's machine. We can always ensure that this is not a problem by ensuring that it only works in the Travis environment, which is neither your machine or my machine.
And that's the sort of the last point too, before it actually gets sent off to this whatever server your app might be built on, or hosted on rather.
Exactly, and ideally, like, these two environments should be like pretty much the same. Like recently, a lot of people have been using Docker, and I think Travis does have support for Docker. Probably not ideal, but Travis does have support for Docker. A bunch of other CI/CD services like Circle CI, Jenkins, GitLab, CodeShip, whatever. All of these also have, I think, support for Docker as well. And Docker actually solves this problem as well. Tries to minimize the differences between the testing environment and the production environment.
Makes sense.
All right. So now that we know that the exit code is success if all tests pass, and something else failed, a failure code if one or more tests failed, Travis actually uses these exit codes to determine if the build succeeded or failed, right? So it's going to run your command, which is the value of the script key, in this case, Python test.py, and if the exit code for that is not 0, it's going to fail the build. So let's actually demonstrate that. Let's, first of all, add our changes. So let's add everything, and then git push to master. Oh, because we didn't commit, so we should git commit first. Let's say enabled Travis and broke tests. Push. So how do I follow this? Theoretically, if I go to the same travis-ci.com/myusername/repository name, which is CI/CD stream, I should see a build log, which I don't in this case. Let me zoom this out a little bit. Yep. So if I click on build history, eventually it's going to appear here. But if I click on build history, I see that there's a build that's started here, and it's listing some information about my commit that I just made.
So it's yellow, meaning that it's like in progress?
Yes, yellow means it's currently running. And if we scroll down a little bit, we can see the build log, what's happening during this build. If we click this little green thing on the top right corner, it's going to make us it's going to essentially have us follow this log by default. So just to avoid having you keep scrolling manually.
So do they build like a little custom environment, like a configured build environment every time you want to trigger a new build?
Correct. Yes. So they essentially, as we say, sandbox these tests.
Because I noticed it said stuff about installing Ruby and different other Node.js. It looks like they've installed quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah, correct. So there are a bunch of standard environments that a bunch of options that you could choose from. I didn't want to dive too deep into the details of how Travis works in this stream, but the idea is that you can think of it as launching a very lightweight virtual computer or virtual machine, a container actually in this case, if you're familiar, and then cloning your code inside of it and running the commands that you specified inside of it. So every time you push to GitHub, every time a Travis CI build is triggered, it's going to run in actually a brand new environment for you.
Cool, makes sense.
All right, so we see the build turned into red, which is usually bad in this case. And if we scroll down, we can see the log of why this build failed after skipping all these details about installing software that we don't really care about now. And we see something very similar to the log that we saw when we ran Python test.py.
It's just like they're running their own version of your environment and just pretty much copying the same output.
Exactly, and here's the command that we specified as the value of the script key, Python test.py, and we see 2 Fs here, 2 tests failed, because one, is thought to be prime, but it's not, and same thing for 0.
Got it. Makes sense.
All right.
We've got a couple messages in the chat. So Gossin says, interesting subject. I sent you my resume. Hope you would take a look because it's interesting. Yeah, again, per the chat we had last time, CS50 is not actively hiring now, and I'm actually not in charge of the hiring process, but I'll definitely take a look at it just to see what you got in there. Richard says, thank you guys for doing these streams. They are really explanatory. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate that you are finding the content helpful. And For Sunlight says, Colton, would you have slides or any kind of CS50 notes if we are noobs and want to have some idea of the content? Do you mean CS50, like the actual course notes, or do you mean the stream-related notes? I know that we do have, well, at least I do strongly believe we have notes for the course. For these streams, we don't really have notes per se, but we do typically upload content to GitHub. And I think, are we going to have this on GitHub to see?
Yes, it's actually on GitHub right now. So if you go to github.com/kzidane/CICD stream, that should be a public repository, and you should be able to see things right now.
Okay, yeah, I think that's kind of like the usually what we have in terms of a support structure for the streams. They're kind of sort of done on the fly, a little bit looser. We don't really necessarily adhere to a strict set of notes per se, but yeah, GitHub and then the video is probably what we have. Maybe in the future for a more structured presentation, we might have might have notes. I know I personally don't typically use notes or slides, but we'll keep it in mind. I'll ask people if they want to start doing that.
Jeffrey Huss says, combining Travis and containers, is it a good practice? So Travis gives you the option to use containers or not. Is it a good practice? I would definitely use containers if I can, because they are more lightweight than virtual machines, but Travis also gives you the option to run a full-fledged virtual machine, which is usually slower in this case, but has its own advantages as well. So maybe check the documentation for that.
Cool.
Sorry because I didn't hear your answer. I would like feedback on the resume, friend.
Yeah, again, Gossin, I'll take a look at it when I can, but CS50 is not actively hiring at the moment, so I can't say that we'll do anything, take any steps about it. But I can take a look at it when I have some time, and I'll give you some feedback.
So let's actually see this build succeed after fixing our error, which we just broke. After fixing our code, I should say. So let's go back to my mathlib library, remove these, run the test again to be sure that everything is okay, git status, git add mymathlib, git commit, fixed, I don't know, less than 2, git push. And then within a second or two, I should hopefully see this user interface changing, running a completely new build for my new commit that I just pushed to GitHub, and hopefully succeeding if all tests pass, which they did locally in this case.
That's why it typically takes a long time, because they have to recreate that whole environment, right, every time?
Excuse me. Yes. Sorry. So yes, if I click on build history here, I should see the new build created. And if I click here, usually it updates the current tab as well, but it seems to be a little bit slow in this case. I'm going to follow the log, and let's see what happens. All right, so it's creating a brand new environment like you mentioned. It's fetching some packages, installing some software that's pre-installed in this environment. And you can see that it ran our tests here, and that all of them passed.
Nice.
And the exit code was 0. And then if we scroll back up, we see green right now, which usually means, good.
Nice.
All right. Okay, what else can we do? Travis actually has a lot more features than what we just introduced. So I actually didn't plan for this, but let's actually try to answer the question that we got earlier about running the tests remotely and having GitHub Force actually merging only if all checks succeeded. So let's do this on the fly. Hopefully nothing breaks. So I'm just gonna.
That's famous last words right there.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna create a new branch here by using get checkout-b, and let's say new feature. This is the name of our branch, feature. Okay. And let's actually suppose we're working on our branch, we broke something again, accidentally. So I'm gonna break these again. I'm gonna do git status. Okay, I'm happy with these. Git diff, if I want to see my changes, I'm happy with these changes. Git add my file, git commit, added new feature, right? And accidentally broke something else. And then git push this to GitHub using git push -u origin new feature. So you'll notice that if we switch back to Travis, hopefully it triggered a new build for the new feature branch, as we see here on the top left hand side. And what we expected is this build is going to fail. So while this build is running, let's actually change something in the repository settings. So if you're an administrator over your repository, if you're an owner, you can click on settings, and I believe branches on the left, and then add rule, right? And then up here, it says apply rule 2. We can say master. We need to apply these rules to master. And I believe it's this option, require status checks to pass before merging.
So this is our new feature branch. So we're basically saying, before we can merge this new feature into master, which is our main, which is usually our main source of truth.
Exactly. So that's essentially what most people do. They have their own, 1 or 2 branches that are the main branches. Master could be, or usually is, one of them. And the idea is, allow people to work on their branches, do whatever they want with them. Even, people from, that are contributors to your repository don't have access to it. Allow them to do whatever they want to their branches. Eventually, they're going to open pull requests to try and tell you, hey, these are a good set of changes. Maybe you should consider merging them into master. And what you can have GitHub do for you is actually enforce these checks to pass before actually being able to merge them.
So like a fail-safe.
Exactly, yes. This is actually a huge time saver, because imagine like you have a very popular open source repository on GitHub and a bunch of people are trying to contribute to it. So you're going to have a bunch of pull requests open, and you can just ignore any pull request that fails the tests until they fix.
You don't have to go through PR after PR after PR that like breaks.
Exactly, yes. And GitHub actually, there's a UI for this that we're going to see hopefully very soon.
Major Jafad is asking, so what happens on the GitHub side? Hopefully this is addressing sort of like that question, because now we are digging into like how to actually integrate Travis and GitHub together.
So they are actually integrated automatically. You don't really have to do anything special to integrate Travis and GitHub. And that's one of the nice things. So what internally happens is that GitHub is going to use an API for Travis CI to check for the build status of the commit that we just pushed, or the branch that we just pushed. And Travis is going to reply and say, hey, this build succeeded, or this build failed, or this build is still running. And then GitHub takes these results and processes them by either preventing you from merging or allowing you to merge.
And it visually tells you in the merge UI, oh, it didn't pass the Travis test, so you can't actually merge it.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
If you want to get your password manager, I can bring that up.
If you don't mind. Just entering my very short password here.
Kareem123.
Exactly. So I confirmed this. And now if you can switch back. All right. Everything is okay. Everything looks good. It created my rule up here. Now let's go back to our repository, and we see this new branch, new feature branch that we created right here. So I can create a pull request from this branch to try to merge it into master, as we see here on the top left. Create a pull request. And then notice if I scroll down, it's showing a Travis icon, and it already figured out that the build failed, showing me a red X here on the right. And if I want more details, I can probably go to more details and try to go to the build itself on Travis and figure out why the build failed. Now this might be a little bit confusing, but because I'm an administrator on this repository, I'm able to merge anyway. But if you're someone who has only write access, you would see this button disabled in this case. All right. So now that we demonstrated this, I thought we could do one more cool thing if we don't have any questions.
Looks like Galosh Cannon is saying, hello, anyone familiar with Java? I have a problem that I'm unable to solve. This stream, I don't think we'll have time to look into Java. It's not really a super freeform stream. But definitely, if you're not in the CS50 Facebook group already, go to the CS50 Facebook group and try asking a question there. They might be able to assist you with that.
I see also ForkDB asking me to show the exception. Yes, sure. If we go to the build and then scroll down to the bottom.
I think you might be referring to this, to Galosh.
Oh. Okay, I misunderstood. All right.
Yeah, because Galosh also wrote after that, he's got his exception, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay. All right. That makes sense.
Looks like you're using an unreferenced variable based on what the output is in the thing there. So I would make sure that you're not referencing a symbol that you didn't define.
Okay. So let's actually explore a bunch of features in Travis itself. So if you click on this more options up here, of course, you have the option to restart the build without clicking on that. But if you click on that and go to settings, you also have the option to, disable build push branches. So sometimes you actually want to trigger the build manually if you want. And in this case, this option allows you to disable, triggering builds automatically when you push branches.
Generally, you usually want to, right? Because you want to automate that process.
Usually, you want this on, but in certain cases, you might want to disable any builds from being triggered when you push something, and just be able to trigger them manually, which Travis allows you to do. Same thing for build push pull requests. So if you have any pull requests open, also Travis is going to automatically trigger builds for them. You can limit concurrent jobs and so on. This feature down here on the left, auto-cancel branch builds. This is, you can imagine a scenario where you push too quickly, so it triggers two builds, but you really care about the last build. So this allows you to cancel, any running builds before running a new build, if that makes sense. Same thing for pull requests here. Down here we see environment variables, and if you're not familiar, if you're not familiar with environment variables, they're essentially as we call them, like shell variables, which are variables in the same sense as we have variables in programming in Python, except that they are usually used to influence or change the behaviors of certain programs. For example, make considers certain environment variables and changes its behavior based on their values. Or storing maybe secret information like API tokens or passwords and so on. So Travis allows you to also add environment variables and their values. It also allows you to disable showing them in the build log, in this case, in case they are like secrets or passwords. You don't really want to show them in the log.
Probably not.
Yeah. And lastly, there's a cron job. You can set or configure Travis to automatically trigger builds no matter you push something or not every once in a while. So in this case, I could configure Travis to trigger a build automatically monthly. I would imagine this is useful for status checks or something.
Something that interacts with other APIs?
Exactly, yeah. So you want to make sure that, to see if your website is up or not. It can be down for some reason without you pushing anything. So you could run a bunch of tests and have Travis notify you if something wrong happens.
Jeffrey Hughes says, I always come late to the CS50 live streams. Is there any schedule for the future ones? Not a formal schedule just yet. Probably we'll have, it'll probably be the case that we always do Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but it's not hard set in stone yet. During the winter break, there'll probably be much fewer, if any, streams, and then we'll have a more consistent schedule starting January 2nd, in which case I think what we'd like to do is something like Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 1 for a few hours, couple hours every week, but we're kind of still developing it. So let us know, everybody let us know sort of like what the ideal time is. We're thinking 1 p.m. is kind of a good time to cover the United States and a lot of the world, but we realize that it's going to be hard to get a perfect time for everybody, just given how disparate folks' schedules are and where people are in the world. But short answer, we're working on a schedule. Long answer is it's hard to a little more complicated.
Yeah, but you could always subscribe to our events on Facebook or wherever you post them and get notifications.
That's true.
Like someone
on our Facebook, we do keep a tally of, or keep a schedule of all the upcoming Twitch streams, at least the ones that we know about, and we generally have a couple of weeks worth scheduled in advance. So if you're not already following our CS50 Facebook account, definitely do that. The actual proper CS50 page, not the group necessarily, but join the group as well because we also post the events there. Linz Potiguara says, I received the notification in his email, or in his or her email. Goliash says, on my job as Python junior web dev, we use Jenkins. Travis just looks not as scary and has a way less monstrous UI. I
haven't tried Jenkins myself, but a lot of people mentioned to me that Travis UI is more familiar than Jenkins. They certainly, I would expect them to do the same thing, essentially, maybe using different set of configurations, different set of name key value pairs, different file names, and so on.
Maybe their UI is just a little bit different.
Yeah, but conceptually they should be the same. I think also some CI and CD services allow you to do these configurations like in the web UI itself. In this case, Travis requires that Travis.yaml file, as we saw, but some of them actually allow you to do this in the web UI. I believe there's also a new feature of GitHub called GitHub Actions that's actually going to do a very similar thing. So it's in beta right now, I think. So we're looking forward to that as well.
A potential replacement for Travis.
Exactly. It's always nice to, Travis is really nice, but it's always nice to minimize the number of tools if you can, so that you don't have to keep track of a separate service.
Yeah. Andre's got a question for you as well.
All right. So let's take that one. Hi, Kareem. Hi, Colton. Sorry, I'm a bit late, so do ignore the question if you've already addressed this. But really stupid question, there's no such thing. Where does the build automated tests of a Travis CI actually happen? Is it server-side? That's a great question. All of these builds do happen server-side on Travis's computers or on Travis's infrastructure servers. So they are completely hosted for us. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, do we have a second question?
Yeah, Geek Nabil.
Okay, I joined the stream 5 minutes ago and I noticed Kareem wrote a prime function and tested it locally and the test succeeded. The question is why we push the code on Travis server. What are the advantages that we get from that way? So I think we answered a very similar question. It's still a good question though. And we mentioned that the idea of having these tests also run on Travis is that the Travis environment is the same for everyone. So if Colton is working on the same repository, if he pushes some changes, then the tests are still run on the Travis CI, even if Colton did not run any of these tests locally first. So this is just to sort of ensure or enforce that these tests are run before we merge them into our master branch.
President Mars, thanks for joining us, says, are there notes that go specifically with the stream? Also, you could create a command for the Twitch chat with all the info to not repeat it all, just put it in the title, wink. So there are no notes formally that go with the stream. We do have a GitHub repository that Kareem is writing to. So it's github.com/kzidane/CICD stream.
We can actually post that maybe.
Yeah, if you want to write that in the chat. And so we generally, for these kinds of streams, because they're more freeform, they don't adhere necessarily to a set of notes or slides. We don't have accompanying slides or notes. But the GitHub repositories that we usually have associated with it will sort of more or less cover the flow of what we've done and have all the accompanying material. So you can follow along that way at least. And then for more structured presentations going in the future, we might have more of a formal sort of slide setup. But as of now, we don't have anything of that type. And as for the Twitch chat command, if you could elaborate on that, I'm not quite sure I understand what you mean by that. Thanks for the question. And then Jeffrey Hughes also plugged in the stream, so thank you.
All right, sounds great. Okay, so the next thing that we should probably go through So before the stream, the lazy part of me thought, write a simple web page, simple HTML page, and deploy it to GitHub Pages. But the developer part of me said, no, we should probably do something cool. And so for the next part, we're going to use a service called GitHub Pages provided by GitHub. And GitHub Pages is simply a hosting service. It's a service that allows us to host static websites.
And it's free for public repos, right?
It is free for public and private repos, I think.
Right.
And what I mean by static websites is that if you have a bunch of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, other assets like images, audio files, video files, and so on, you should be able to host your static website on GitHub Pages pretty easily, literally just by pushing your code.
President Mars, command that automatically posts all links to your group /GitHub. That's a good point. I'll start putting that in the description. I think I put that in the description for a couple of videos. For the videos that we put on YouTube, we definitely do that. But on Twitch, I think only just the first couple. Oh, a Twitch bot that actually does. Oh, okay, that's a good point. Yeah, Twitch does have bots that you can program, which in itself would be an interesting stream. A stream on programming a Twitch bot. Maybe we'll do that live sometime. That's a cool idea. So yeah, thanks for the suggestion, President Mars and Linz Potagora.
Yep. So if you've a really cool static website that I'm going to use right now is the sample code that Brian used for his stream on React, which is, by the way, great stream. So do give that a look if you're interested in React. Brian is a great teacher. And if you don't recall, it was a single file, game.html, that had a very simple game. So let's actually open this in Google Chrome. And it's a game that essentially, let me zoom this in a little bit, gives you a bunch of addition problems, and you're supposed to write the correct answer, hit enter, and so on. It gives you a different problem. If you write something wrong, it gives you, it switches the problem to red.
I like how we sort of build on that last stream. And we're going a couple of streams ago, and now we're using it in another context. That's a cool idea.
I really enjoyed that stream because I knew something about Angular and knew something about Vue, but I really didn't know anything about React aside from the fact that it's pretty similar to both of these two.
It's very elegant.
But yeah, Brian did a great introduction in that, so I highly recommend watching it if you haven't already. All right, so the cool thing about this is, one, we can deploy a static website like this to GitHub Pages, have it hosted online. Two, we can also do a bunch of tests on it. What do you prefer? Do you prefer testing first or deploying first?
Probably testing.
Okay,
I would say.
So the testing code for this is a little bit more complicated than the testing code from before. Again, this is not really, we're not really going to go into deep details about the code here, but I wrote this in advance, and let me show you what it does after commenting these out first. All right, so I'm importing a bunch of stuff here. I'm using a tool or a library called Selenium, which is a very popular tool for testing the front end of our web applications in this case. So I'm importing a bunch of stuff from Selenium, and I have a helper function here that takes a file name and returns the URL for it, file : something, if you've noticed the thing in the top here. So this function is essentially going to take game.html and return something like this so that I'm able to open the file in my browser. And similar to the structure of the previous test.py, we have a class, in this case called GameTests, that extends UnitTest case, UnitTest.test case. So very similar. We have helper functions that we'll look at later. Let's actually start by these test functions. So the first thing, we have a function called test_title. And can you try to guess what this does? Just by reading through the code.
So it looks like it says it's asserting equal, self.assert equal. So earlier we looked at assert false, which means make sure that this is equal to false, and it'll return whether it's equal to false or not.
Right.
So driver.title is basically, I'm assuming that that's the title of the, I don't know if it would be the title of the tab but the title of the web page or
yeah,
the tab,
it's
one of the two.
Pretty much the same, yes.
And then just make sure that it equals hello, the string hello.
Exactly. So if you've noticed, actually earlier when we opened this in the browser, the title of the tab here, as you mentioned, is hello. So we're doing exactly that. We're checking that the title of the tab is hello in this case. What about the next one? Do you have an idea?
So on line 11?
Yes.
So it's a function called test input cleared after correct. So I'm guessing because in Brian's stream, if he got the answer correct, the text field would clear.
Correct. That's exactly right.
We have a variable called underscore input, which is equal to self.solve problem index 2. Which I'm not entirely sure what that is. I'm guessing that that's a DOM element.
Okay, so we're solving the problem. Yes, we're getting a DOM element. We're getting the input text field in particular, in this case.
Okay, and then we're doing the same thing we did earlier where we were saying self.assert equal. So is it equal that the value attribute of that DOM element, so whatever its actual literal value is that we can see in the page, is equal to the empty string?
That's exactly right. Let me actually demonstrate this. So as we mentioned, if we get the answer right, we hit enter, the text field is cleared afterwards.
Nice.
So we're exactly testing for that. We are solving a problem correctly, presumably, and then hitting enter, and then we're checking the value of the input field to make sure that it's clear.
And this is sort of how you do the front-end development. You're actually picking apart pieces from the DOM, from the web page, and it's like comparing the values at one given instance of time.
Correct. Last one we have here is test underscore read underscore after underscore incorrect, or test read after incorrect. And I try to be descriptive in my like function names. These are, you might notice these are a bit long, but I think that's mostly okay for testing functions.
Yeah.
So that you have an idea. But I think you could also, if you look more into UnitTest, you could also provide a more detailed descriptions of your testing functions in the, as like doc strings. UnitTest is probably for another stream, so we're not really going to dive into this much. Excuse me. And in this case, we're also solving a problem incorrectly, presumably, as indicated by this correctly equals false argument. And then checking that the color of the problem element, which is a div, is RGBA 255001, which means it's red and fully visible, 100% opacity or transparency.
Jeffrey Hughes asks, CS50 hiring, I'm guessing that's what you're asking. Not actively, no. And generally when we do hire, to the best of my knowledge, we post it on our CS50 Facebook page if it's something that we're seeking candidates for outside of sort of the people that we know privately and within Harvard. So definitely, or even if you are part of Harvard University, pay attention to our CS50 Facebook group for more info on that if we do hire more folks in the future. Thanks for the question.
Cool. Okay, so again, let me demonstrate this one last time. If I enter the answer wrong and I hit enter, the color of the problem should turn red.
Right.
So this is what this is testing for.
And so Selenium, I'm guessing, is giving you this function that's value of CSS property?
Correct, yes. So problem is the DOM element. Let's actually look at the solve problem. And this is a helper function that I wrote that literally does this. It solves a problem correctly or not based on what you pass here as the value of the correctly parameter, and it first finds the element whose ID is problem. It then tries to, solve the problem, solve the addition problem. If you're not familiar with this, maybe look at the documentation for functools.reduce. But if you're going to trust me on this, this solves the problem correctly, assuming it didn't do any mistakes. It then gets the input element by its tag name. And then sends a bunch of keys to that text input. So either enters the correct solution of the problem or something else, which is presumably incorrect, then hits return, and then returns the three things that we care about, which is the problem element, the input element, and the result, which is the correct result in this case.
That's cool. Nice little simple function to solve the problem.
Yeah, I mean, you might even start by like duplicating all of this logic in your functions, but I mean, it's nice if you can factor something else. There's also a function that we didn't talk about much called setup, and this is also a special function in UnitTest.test case that is run before every test is run. So in this case, what I want to do before every test is actually open the file game.html in my browser. It's actually cool if we demonstrate this live. So let's try to run Python test.py as we did before, And of course, there's no module called Selenium,
and
because
previously you had that Selenium virtual environment set up, so this is, I'm assuming.
Exactly, yes. So I deactivated my Selenium environment. So to install Selenium, you're going to have to do pep install Selenium like this, if you don't have it installed already. You're also going to need something called Chrome WebDriver. So if you Google Chrome.
If you're using Chrome.
If you're using Chrome, but you could also, the good thing about Selenium is that it doesn't care much about the browser. There are a bunch of supported browsers. Firefox, I believe, is one of them. So there are drivers for different, browsers that you could use with Selenium. So you should download this if you don't have it and install it on path. So in my case, I put it in user local bin Chrome driver in this case. So let me I have this already all set up in my Selenium environment. So let me activate this and try again. And the test failed. Driver is not defined. This didn't happen before. So let's see. Name driver is not defined. Let's see.
Because you commented the code out, yeah.
Bunch of things out. So let's try to fix this. Oh, I commented this line and I shouldn't have. So in this case, just to initialize Selenium or the WebDriver for Chrome, in this case, I just do WebDriver, which we imported from up here from Selenium, .chrome, literally. Try this again, fingers crossed. And it opens the browser automatically. It does a bunch of stuff really, really fast.
Nice.
And then if we look back at the terminal, we should see that all tests succeed, because presumably, we didn't break anything. So let's look again at the code and try to break something.
Probably a very satisfying thing to watch for a very large set of test cases.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're going to change this in a bit, but this is really an amazing thing to watch when you see the computer doing things automatically in a browser tab.
It's a good way to test Chrome's speed as well.
Yes, true in a sense. Okay, so I commented out this line here, which clears the input field after a correct response. So I just breaking it intentionally. So let's see what happens here. If I run the test again, a bunch of crazy things happen again. And then if I check, it's telling me that it expected the value of the input field to be empty, but it found 2 in it.
Right.
So that means that the input field wasn't cleared. So in this case, the test failed. So one question that might come to your mind is, how is this going to work in Travis at all, right? How is Travis going to be able to launch a graphical web browser and run a bunch of tests in it? And the answer is it doesn't, because there's a feature of Chrome and other browsers as well that allows these browsers to be run in the so-called headless mode, which is a mode without actually a graphical user interface. So you can have a browser without actually a graphical user interface. And that's what we're going to use in this case. So let me comment these in, I guess, again. Oops, not delete them. So in this case, I just added the headless option to Chrome options. I created Chrome options up here from WebDriver.Chrome options by instantiating WebDriver.Chrome options. I added the headless argument, and then I instantiated the driver the same way, except that I passed options this time. So let's try this again. It still presumably runs the test in Chrome, but we don't see a crazy thing happen using GUI.
Right.
And this is what we're going to use in an environment like Travis to test our project. Any questions? Let me actually fix the bug that I made.
Yeah, the React bug's still there.
You know what? Let's actually push this way and see if it's gonna, how it's gonna fail. So let's actually take a look at Travis.yaml, and it's pretty similar in this case. We are using the same language, Python in this case, because our tests are in Python, although technically they don't have to be in this case. I think Selenium also supports a bunch of other languages. Excuse me. So this is a new thing. Sudo colon required means I don't want to run my tests in a container. I want to run my tests in a fully fledged machine, a virtual machine. And the reason I have this is because I want to use sudo. And Travis, unfortunately, doesn't allow you to use sudo inside of container, so I have to use a virtual machine. So it's going to be a little bit slower, but it's going to give us the feature that we care about. Turns out I don't have to install Chrome on Travis because it allows us to enable Chrome simply by passing add-ons and then as a child key of it, or however you want to call it, Chrome :stable. I also know this by checking the Travis documentation. A step that we haven't seen before is the before install step. So we saw the install step. The install step usually is used, although nothing forces you to do that, is usually used to install your package with all its dependencies. In this case, I'm using before install, or I usually use before install to install any maybe build dependencies or any testing dependencies in this case. So I'm installing Chrome driver because I don't think it's installed by default on Travis. I'm installing it in the same location, user local bin, and then I'm removing the zip file that I downloaded. I'm also installing Selenium. So this is how you can run more than one command in one step, like script or install, or before install in this case, by adding this little dash before the command, and then before every command actually. So this creates a list of commands. So I'm first installing Chrome driver as we mentioned, and then I'm simply running pip install Selenium.
So this is a little bit more complicated and like custom tailored than doing like a requirements.txt that you would use pip to install?
Correct, but in this case, I believe requirements.txt is usually used to install or list the dependencies of your project. In this case, I'm not sure, like people could argue with that. I don't think Selenium is a dependency of my project. My project doesn't need Selenium to run, but I do need Selenium to test, so that's kind of separate.
Okay, that makes sense.
All right, so what I'm going to do now is get status. All these changed. Let me add everything, and let me get push to master. Of course, I forgot to get commit again. Broke tests, push. And if I go back to my browser by closing all of these, my repository is called Zidane/Reacts Edition, I believe. Yep, there you go. I'm going to build history. I'm going to find that there's a new build here. Click it. It's also still taking a little bit of time to start, and this is actually probably going to take a little bit longer because it's more heavyweight than the container itself. There's not much really that we can do while waiting for this.
That's the unfortunate part about it. But
yeah, I mean, we can look at the Travis documentation while this build is running. So you can have among Travis feature, you can have a bunch of jobs that are running simultaneously if you care about this. So if you have a bunch of tests that you want to run side by side, so to speak, or in parallel in the same time, you can do that using the jobs feature of Travis. Travis also explains a bunch of how to install your dependencies for your project. So do definitely check the configuration for how to do this if you're curious. The programming languages that Travis supports. So we happen to use Python in this case, but here's a list of all the languages that Travis supports.
Quite a good set, actually.
Yeah.
Even Perl.
Yeah. So there's Perl, there's Swift, there's I don't know who codes in Visual Basic now, but there's Visual Basic.
Who codes in Perl? That's what I want to know.
Okay. There are a bunch of scripts in Perl right now, but okay. Anyway, not our problem. Deployment options. We're going to look at deployment shortly. Here's how to deal with environment variables, documentation about that as well. Here's how to encrypt data. So if you have passwords or security tokens, you can actually encrypt these using Travis or have Travis encrypt them for you so they're not publicly accessible by everyone. We talked about using an environment variable for this, but there are other options that Travis gives you in this case. Also, one of the cool features of Travis that we do use is the notification feature. So you could have Travis actually, send you an email once the build succeeds or fails, or send a message to Slack if you're using Slack, or a bunch of other things. So this is what notifications on a higher level are used for. I believe this is for developing Travis itself. If you're curious, by the way, Travis is open source on GitHub as well. So if you go to github.com/TravisCI, you can see a bunch of their repositories. And this is probably Travis for Enterprise if you have a big company and you care about this.
You can make and host your own version of Travis.
Exactly. So if you go back to our build here, it's obviously broken, and let's try to figure out why. And if you scroll down, it's telling us pretty much the same thing. So it's ran the same test that we ran locally using a headless browser in this case, and it's telling us that it found 2 in the input field, but it actually expected an empty string. So let's actually fix this and try again. So if you go back to game.html, oops, sorry Brian for breaking your code.
It's for educational purposes.
Yep. Okay, save, add game.html, commit, fixed again, push, and it's going to take a minute or two to finish starting and building. Let's click on this just to get it ready. All right. Now, how do we deploy our website to GitHub Pages? And the nice thing about Travis is that it actually has a so-called provider that's built in that allows you to do this pretty easily. And so let's actually Google this. Let's do GitHub Pages Travis CI. And first thing that appears here is GitHub Pages deployment, and it seems to be the case that I need this block of code. If you read through, you'll figure this out as well. So it seems to be the case that I need this block of code in my travis.yaml. So I'm just going to do exactly that, copy that, go to travis.yaml, paste this here, and then just go through these one more time. So here's an interesting thing. So the skip cleanup key value pair, actually in this case, happens to be useful only when you have certain build artifacts. So if your program or your app is built into static website, this would be useful. It's not really useful in this case. By default, after the script step, Travis actually clears any changes in the repository or stashes them if you remember git stash from the last stream. So we don't really care about this right now. We can get rid of it. GitHub token is the token that Travis is going to be using to make a push to your repository on GitHub, because this is what we need in order to have GitHub Pages working.
For the authentication.
Yep, correct. I don't really care about keep history. I'm gonna delete this comment because it's not really useful in my case. I can infer this. By default, I think this is going to happen only on the master branch, and this is what on branch column master tells us. So you can imagine changing this. You can imagine working on a development branch, and then only when you merge or push your code to your master branch that this deployment is actually going to happen to production. But more importantly, this deployment is only going to happen if the script step succeeds.
Right.
So if our tests all pass in this case, which is a good thing. All right, so we seem to need a GitHub token, and I forgot about this before the stream, so I'm going to go to my github.com.
Do you want me to turn your...
let's actually show first where to generate a token first.
Oh, here, let's take the chat off so that we can see where...
Okay, so I clicked on my profile picture here up on the top right. I chose settings, and then I believe it's under developer settings, and then personal access tokens.
Right.
So you can actually generate personal access tokens using this view right here. So if you can switch my screen right now, I'm going to generate my token. Let's call mine React. And then I'm going to give it the repo scope, generate token, copy this token, and then can you switch back to my screen?
Yep.
Thank you. So I generated the token and copied it. Actually, we're going to have to go away one more time, but not now.
Aren't you going to? You have to paste it into your file, don't you?
Sure. So yeah, let me actually do this. So GitHub token, paste it here, add. Okay.
So you can show the fields that you entered it into if you want.
Sure. So here's my previous view. Here's the build that we just ran after fixing. Everything passed and everything is as expected. So for this, we're going to use an environment variable. And to add an environment variable, I'm going to do more options, settings, and then go down to environment variables, right? And then add a variable here. In this case, we seem to be using a variable called GitHub_token, all caps. This is not including the $sign. The $sign is used to, refer to this variable in the shell after assigning it. So what I did was that GitHub token, and then pasted the token here.
Right.
And then hit add.
And that's what we see right above there where you have environment variables set.
Exactly. You need to make sure to, in case of secret credentials like these, we need to make sure that the display value in build log option is off, because otherwise you can actually see your GitHub token in build log, or everyone can see it, which is worse. Yeah. Also, an important feature of Travis is that it actually allows you to, once you set the environment variable, you can't change its value, right? So no one, even me, including me, can actually see what the value is in here. All I can do to it is actually delete it if I want.
Major Jafat says, stupid question, what does it mean to deploy a website?
That's a great question, actually. What it means to deploy a website is to publish it somewhere, for example. So if your website, in this case, we're going to publish our website on GitHub Pages, so host it somewhere, be able to reach out to it using the internet. But yes, the term deploy actually was very confusing to me at first. But yeah, all this means is actually, publish our website somewhere.
Take it from your local machine to some server where anybody can reach it.
Correct. But it actually, interestingly, it can actually mean something else in different contexts. Yeah. So if I'm deploying a Python package, for example, you might think of that as, publishing this on some package index like PyPy, or, maybe creating a release on GitHub, or, something like that. Good question. All right, so now that I have this set, there's one more thing that I need to do. First of all, I'm going to go to my repository in GitHub. So kzidane/react edition. And I'm going to do settings. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit to GitHub Pages. I'm going to select my default branch, which is master in this case. And this is the branch that I want GitHub Pages to consider. If I push to master branch, what GitHub is going to do is actually serve my website somewhere. So let's choose this, let's hit save, and then let's actually, now that this is done, let's actually do another push after we added the deployment stuff. Git status is changed, Travis CI, commit, and then enabled GitHub Pages, git push. All right, so now this is going to take a second or two.
And once it finishes verifying that the build succeeded, it's going to take that deploy key and follow with the instructions that you specified for it, the token, and put that on the internet somewhere.
That's exactly right. So let's actually follow the build log here. And let's wait for this to start. All right. This is going to take a while. While we're waiting for this, once you enable GitHub Pages on GitHub from the repository settings as we showed, this is the URL that you could use to reach out to your.
It gives you like your username.github.io normally / and then the name of your repo.
Correct, but you could also specify a separate, custom domain if you have this already. Okay. If you have your own domain, you could just set this up if you want to. All right. So hopefully, now that our tests pass, it's going to go through the deployment step. Notice the build is still running after passing the tests. And now it's installing deployment dependencies, a bunch of Travis-related stuff, cloning the repository, it seems, and then deploying it, and exited with 0, which is great.
Nice.
All right. So now, hopefully, if we go to this /games, because our file is called games, or is it game? It's just game. So game.html. Hopefully we should see our game online.
Nice. Live on the internet for everybody to see.
All right. So that's everything I have for today.
The Jaw song, or the Yaw song says, hello. Hello, Jaw song or Yaw song. Not sure if you're if that's a German J or an English J or some other J.
You want to switch to my screen?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. Did I?
That's okay. That's okay. I'm just going to quickly get rid of this token because we don't need it anymore.
It's putting it online. Yes. Yes. Website is now online.
Yep.
Greece. Ah, okay. I'm not sure how the J is pronounced in Greece, actually. But hello from hello to you from Greece. Thank you for joining us. That's quite far away.
Yeah, thank you.
So that was that's it for today's topic, you said?
Yep, that's all I have for today. We can maybe take any questions if you have any.
All right, sure. Yeah, we'll stick around for a few questions. So we talked about CI/CD.
Yep.
So unit testing, deploying with Travis. So starting from the bottom, going all the way up to fully deploying an app and testing it along the way. So yeah, can they play it? Badia 21610. So
yeah, definitely. Just go to
what's the URL?
kzidane.github.io/react-addition.
kzidane/github. It's not the shortest URL.
Yep.
Slash.
That's why you should configure your custom domain.
Yeah.
/react-addition /game.html. So yes, you should be able to access this now on the internet.
Wow, look at that. That's so cool. We put a website online live on CS50 TV. Corral says, hi from Italy. Hi from the
Hello
US.
there.
Thanks for joining us all the way from Italy. Wow, we have such an international audience. It's amazing.
That's amazing, yeah.
What is it? I'm guessing it's evening over there, right? What's evening? Is it buena suerte? Oh, no, that's Spanish, I think. What's how do you say good evening?
It's 8:31 p.m. Colton.
How do you say good evening in Italian? I forgot. Let's figure this out.
I have no idea.
Oh, we'll do it live. Good evening is buonasera. I was close. Buonasera. I think I said buena suerte. I think it means good luck, and buena suerte was good luck in Spanish. Buonasera.
Yep.
8:30 is not too late, but it's a nice, comfortable time to watch some Travis CI streaming with Kareem Zidane, CS50's Kareem Zidane. It looks like the white on your Chrome fades down to a slightly dark color. You can see it on the stream. It's like an off-white. Or is it because you're like Flux enabled or something?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Like your screen goes yellow over the course of the day? Does that happen?
Not really.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so.
Kalinikta in Greece. Oh, nice. I'm not sure where that is. Kalinikta. I'm not spelling it correctly. Kalinikta. It's bringing up the actual Greece, which is a little bit, or the Greek, which is a little bit trickier. Why is it not bringing it up? Here, let's bring up the actual Greek.
Well,
oh, that's how you say good evening. Oh, I see. Good night. Kalinikta, yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, suerte is fate in Spanish. Ah, yes. Yeah. Good fate. Good luck. Buena suerte.
Cool.
Buena suerte.
You do get a language tutorial as well, not just...
Yeah, a little bit, a very poor language tutorial on CS50's live stream. Question, why do most programmers go for a Mac instead of a laptop using a Linux distribution? What's your opinion on that?
I personally use Linux Ubuntu specifically. I feel like I'm much more comfortable with that, much more productive with that. I haven't tried Mac too much, so I can't really say a useful opinion on this, but maybe you could give us an insight.
Well, I mean, they're similar enough because a lot of the same programs and shell commands are identical. They do have some differences. Obviously, package managers are going to be different.
Yeah.
It's apt-get for Ubuntu, right? Versus Mac doesn't really have
Snap
a built-in.
right as well.
Which one?
There's Snap as well. Snap.
Oh, okay.
On Ubuntu, but
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I mean, honestly, like Ubuntu comes with a whole bunch of stuff pre-installed that makes certain things easier for me, which is good. Also, the fact that, and I'm saying this honestly, I struggle sometimes to do something, but I also learn a bit more using Linux.
Yeah, no, it's definitely much more. It's closer to like the actual kernel, I guess, or closer to like I guess your file, you're not abstracted as much away using graphical user interfaces. You're looking at all your files as they actually are.
Yeah, that's true. Cool. Yeah, at some point, yeah.
And you're interacting with things that normally, like environment variables, aren't something that a user typically interacts with.
Yeah, I mean, these exist in Mac and in Windows as well, but they're not.
But you're more forced into.
If you're a normal Windows user, you probably wouldn't hear about these.
Yeah. You do occasionally. Windows development is a little bit. It feels messy, but at least they have the Linux Bash subsystem or something like that.
I haven't tried that one as well, but I've heard mixed opinions on that.
I'm on Ubuntu too, but thinking to go to Mac. I don't know if there's necessarily a super. I mean, Mac is just great user interface, and that's like their selling point. Is their operating system is just nice to use, but I honestly don't like. If you're comfortable on Ubuntu, I can't necessarily recommend either way. I think just go with whatever system. I'd say try a Mac and see if you like it. Try a PC, see if you try everything just to get a sense of what the landscape looks like, just to determine whether or not you find a particular operating system enjoyable to use or not. Let's see what we have. Jeffrey says, been 7 years now under Windows Linux and used a VM for Mac, and I think to switch to a real Mac. Yeah, no, I mean, Macs are really, they have a lot of cool features and just a lot of their services work really well together, but it's not mandatory. Like, you can get by using whatever machine you're comfortable with. Windows has PowerShell, i.e. a better shell for Windows. Yeah, you can use Windows PowerShell instead of the command prompt to do some more stuff. And you can also install like Git Bash and like a Node shell and all kinds of other stuff.
I do believe that Travis CI also supports an OS X environment. If your application works only on OS X, or you would like to test your application also on OS X, I don't think I mentioned that, but by default, I believe it uses some distribution, like some version of Ubuntu as well, maybe 16.04 or something.
That makes sense. I'm guessing probably because most like web applications typically assume that they're running on like a Linux server as opposed to a Mac.
That's the default options, but I mean you can have a bunch of other things as well here. Cool.
Seems like a very flexible platform.
It is. Yeah, I mean, it personally, like, it definitely like made a lot of things easier for us. It made us like focus more on like development rather than sort of worrying about the details of how to deploy your app. Because you can imagine deploying your app, if it's more complicated than a GitHub Pages, static website, can be really like complicated and can require a lot more time and a lot more effort to do, which would make it mistake prone or error prone. So you sometimes finding yourself like messing things up. But right now you literally have a computer doing this for you, and it's doing the exact same thing every time. So there should be no reason why this should fail.
Yeah, agreed. Jocelyn says, you're awesome, guys. Thanks, Jocelyn. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Says, I have a suggestion for the game programming streams. You could do a game with basic networking, maybe using Lua sockets, something like a multiplayer snake or some basic thing like that. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll take a look at it. I'd have to read up on Lua socket and probably tinker around with it a bit before diving in blind. But I could maybe put together something simple and try to implement it live. Bodia 2610, there's PowerShell for Linux. Interesting. I'm not too familiar with that. Maybe you have some knowledge about that. If you want to read that last question.
Sure. Kareem, when does it make sense to use UnitTests or E-tests? New programmers add tests just like that, even if it's unnecessary. I'm not familiar with E2E tests, so I'm just going to Google this on the fly and see if I might be familiar with it. I don't know. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not sure. I thought E2E was end-to-end testing.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to read more on
I'm
that.
guessing testing for testing. I think the scenario is like testing like the whole flow of using an application from the beginning of a user logging in and like doing all the features of your application until like the last like logging out of your application.
Does that also mean that like you could use unit tests for something like that? Because it seems like you could implement a whole flow using unit tests.
Yeah, you would have all the sub things as unit tests, and then an end-to-end testing would be the entire application, like from a user's point of view, like using it like a normal user would, basically.
Yeah.
Like basically it'd be a sequence of unit tests in a particular order, I think.
Yeah, forgive me for my ignorance on this subject, but If I understand this correctly, it seems like you could use unit tests, but also perform or use end-to-end tests. If the idea is, should you write test cases that are not necessary? Probably no. But some people, it's writing tests is not really a fun thing to do. It's not an easy thing to do, and it can take a lot of time. So what a lot of people I know do is actually write tests as necessary. Like when we figure out a bug, like we demonstrated, we actually do pinpoint this bug with a test case, and then eventually you're going to have a bunch of test cases that are that cover most, if not all, of the problems in your code. I know there are also some tools called test coverage tools that potentially point you to certain parts of your application that you didn't cover in terms of testing. So maybe you could give that a look and maybe try to use them. But yeah, I would say especially if you you should probably write only the necessary test cases in this case. Don't try to overwhelm yourself by trying to write a whole bunch of tests before even starting to code. Which I some people say that's a good practice, but it can discourage you, I would say.
Yeah. It's delusional. Says, what does this fall under?
I'm not sure. What are you referring to? End-to-end?
I think he's referring to. I think he's just asking, what did we do today? Probably unit testing is what we covered today.
Yeah, we did cover. Well, we didn't cover unit testing in details. We did cover continuous integration, continuous deployment, and we also talked a little bit about unit testing as well, and testing using Selenium, which is pretty useful.
Nice.
All right.
All right, well, we'll see if anybody has any last questions. I'll bring us back to the middle title card there. But yeah, it was a good stream. So thanks for coming on again and giving us a part 2 of the sort of the GitHub, and now we did the Travis stuff. We'll have to have you on for an actual programming stream sometime. Yeah, hopefully. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks everyone for joining today. I hope that was useful. Yeah, no, it was really well done. Thank you. So tomorrow we have Dan Coffey on the stream, CS50's head producer. Yeah. He helped set up this whole room, so shout outs to Dan Coffey. He'll be talking to us about the Draw 50 app that David uses in lecture to simulate a digital blackboard and how that works. It's actually a JavaScript application that we use on a giant, a giant Microsoft Surface TV. Then on Wednesday it'll be just me. We'll do tic-tac-toe in Lua and Love 2D. So back to 2D from last stream. Last Friday we did a Unity stream in 3D. So we're going to go back to 2D. Very simple game, tic-tac-toe, which will be a lot of fun. And then on Friday, Nick Wong, who did a stream last week, will be back, and he'll be giving us a tutorial on Linux commands. So if anything that we've done today or in the past with the command line has been a little bit sort of difficult to parse or maybe a little foggy, and you want a more hands-on breakdown of what's going on at the command line, some basic commands and a tutorial, then Nick will give us a basic tutorial then. And then the week after that, we got some more stuff. We have Veronica Nutting, CS50's head course assistant, will be giving us a Python tutorial. So 100 cool things to do in Python. That's great. Depending on how much time we have, we may not be able to cover all 100, but we'll try our best. So yeah, we have a lot of stuff lined up. Basedvan says, hi Basedvan, thanks for having you in today. It's Delusional says, are you related to Zinedine Zidane? I wish. I'm a big fan of Zinedine Zidane. It's just a coincidence that our last names are the same. But yeah, he's definitely a fantastic player, and I'm a big fan of him. Major Javad, thanks Kareem and Colton, this has been useful. Thanks for coming in today and being a part of the stream. Glad to have you today. M. Kloppenberg, thanks for coming in. Thanks, Kareem and Colton. Lintz, thank you. Jasong says bye. Thanks, Jasong. Thanks for coming in. Velikir, thanks, Kareem and Colton. It's very useful as usual. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. Basedvan, what about deploying to another site or place other than in this video? That's great. Can you actually switch my computer one last time? So if you go to Travis deployment provider, if you search for that, you would find that Travis actually supports a whole bunch of deployment providers. So we happen to be using GitHub Pages in this stream. Let me zoom this in a little bit. But you can also deploy to Heroku somewhere here. Let's see, Heroku.
yep, there you go. So you can also deploy to Heroku. You can also deploy to, AWS Elastic Beanstalk, cloud storage, package clouds, a bunch of other services. And even if none of these fits your use case, you could also have a custom sort of deployment script that does whatever you want.
There's a massive number of services there.
Yeah.
Lids Portuguara, who is the cat in the profile picture? If you're referring to the CS50 Facebook group, then that's the Happy Cat, or I Can Has Cheeseburger Cat, which is a very famous meme cat that CS50 has adopted for a lot of its iconography. So definitely Google that, check that out, see the history behind it.
Yeah.
Andre says, Kareem did an awesome game for his CS50 final project way back when. Perhaps you could persuade him to revisit this, Colton.
Thank you so much. I don't really think of it as an awesome game.
What was the game that you did?
I think it was some version of checkers. It did use the Stanford Portable Library. I don't even think I have the code for that anymore.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can maybe pull it up or maybe implement a version of it live on camera sometime.
Sure. I mean, you're the gaming, developer, so you should probably.
Well, we can maybe have you. We'll have you as a guest for that one. We'll have you talk through your.
I did watch your Unity stream, by the way. I didn't know anything about Unity until I watched your stream, and it was amazing.
Oh yeah, Unity is super awesome too. I'm super excited to do some more streams in that. It's
nice
an awesome
to
tool.
get a basic idea of how all of this fits together and how it works. And it's really simpler than I thought.
Yeah, it's very easy. It's very. I mean, it gets very complicated the farther you dig into it, obviously. Yeah. But on this, just to get started with it, super nice and super easy.
That's great. We have. It's Delusional says, thank you guys, thank you. I use Python and other languages for benchmarking and found out as a web dev that Python nowadays is falling back and is slower than other languages. I read that it's the most used language in AI and machine learning. My question is why Python for AI machine learning? Can't we use other languages? So that's actually a great question, but also very broad. Python is definitely a great language, but there are a bunch of other languages that are also that also do very well. One of the best things about Python is that it's really present in a lot of fields. Among them is backend web development and machine learning and AI stuff. I believe data science stuff as well. So, I mean, you'd find every language has its advantages and disadvantages. It's not necessarily the case that there's one language that's the absolute best language. Do you have anything to add, maybe?
I would say it's definitely the case that Python is not necessarily the fastest scripting language that exists, but it is one of probably the most readable and easy to program in, and that's a big thing because oftentimes it's not necessarily as important that your script run super fast, especially now that computers are just so fast that the time that you would get writing in another language isn't as important. But it's important that you have high level of productivity as a programmer, and being able to program in something that is very human readable like Python is certainly advantageous to you and to people that are especially just trying to get into the industry. It's a very approachable language. There are libraries that are compiled in C, like NumPy and certain other SciPy, certain other, a lot of the big sort of data analytic libraries, they do get compiled into binaries that Python calls that are actually in C, so you actually are getting very performant results with Python. But yeah, I mean, it's ultimately, I would say, if I were to pinpoint what it is, and I'm not necessarily an expert, especially not in machine learning and AI, but just knowing the language, probably ultimately comes down to a lot of really great libraries and just a very readable language. But no, certainly you could write scripts and programs in other languages that do machine learning and AI. R is very huge in statistical analysis now, even though Python is a language that's often used for that. So it just kind of, it changes. The status quo is such that Python's great, but another language could come out any day and surpass it. Another library could come out and surpass it.
That's true. We have M. Klopingberg says, Andre, you make me curious. Got a link. I don't think it's hosted anywhere online. I will try to look at it.
Do a little bit of digging. Maybe we'll bring it up on our stream. Maybe.
On what date will you do the Python stream?
So next Monday. So that's the 19th, 11/19 at 1 p.m. Veronica Nutting and I will, she'll be hosting and I'll be co-hosting. She'll be doing a tour of Python. So 100 cool things to do in Python. 100 approximately. We'll see how many we can do.
This was a question from President of Mars. We have the JSON. I like your style, Colton.
Thanks, Jason. Much appreciated. Thank you for that.
And then we have Jeffrey Huss. Thanks for the answers, guys. Watching you from Morocco.
Nice. Well, thanks for tuning in all the way from Morocco.
Yeah,
I know we had someone else from Morocco as well. M. Kloppenberg once read an article that approached it like this. System resources are cheaper than man hours. The productivity is higher in Python because of the simplicity of the language, so the man hours are cheaper. In the end, it's just cheaper. Yeah, so ultimately, human time is the most important valuable at this point in history, just given how fast computers are now. Depending on the problem that you're trying to solve, it could be the case that maybe the computational resources are important. But again, I think for most use cases and most companies, outside of maybe Google and larger, big monolithic companies that are doing massive sort of sets of computation on large data, Python and its current limitations are perfectly sufficient.
But yeah, it all comes down to this, a bunch of trade-offs, a bunch of upsides and downsides that you have to choose from and decide on what language would fit your use case best.
Yes. Lord Demir 24, hey, yeah, all the way from Sweden, working as a dev, but I love looking at this Twitch channel. Awesome, thanks for joining us from Sweden.
Yeah.
Curious to hear what sort of dev work you're working on.
Yeah, that would be great.
We've touched every continent almost, I think. And they have so many people from all over the place. It's awesome. CS50's network is vast. It's awesome you guys paying the great attention to answer the questions. Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest thing that makes this channel awesome is kind of having that two-way communication. I said this time and time again, but making a video on YouTube is great, and we do that. But being able to actually communicate, when we make a video for YouTube, it's kind of like a script that we're following, and we sort of have everything sort of pre-planned, and we're going with the flow, right? And we've established it in advance. But having things like this, it's a little bit sort of unpredictable. You don't know what someone's going to ask. You don't know what directions we're going to go, what we're going to talk about. A lot of cool things happen. And we, in my game programming streams previously, we had folks like Andre and Irene who contribute and help us solve bugs live. And that's something that you can't do in a YouTube video, right? Normally, I would just have to cut that out. Or reshoot it or something, but we get a different sort of approach to that here. All continents except Antarctica, says Andre. Well, for now, we'll see. Maybe we can set up an embassy in Antarctica. I work as a system developer doing automation in a platform called ServiceNow, and on free time I'm doing React and full stack web dev. Been a dream to do games, but seem to never find time for it. Well, tune in on Wednesday if you want to look at some the very basic game, Tic-Tac-Toe in Love 2D. If you haven't looked at the other streams, we did Unity last week, and I've done a couple other ones on Lua and Love 2D. President of Mars, any recommendations for websites with beginner exercises or coding games? Currently starting out in Python or C. Codecademy is good. I would look at Codecademy. I'm going to toss that in the chat.
Yep.
Codecademy.com. I believe it's .com. They're good for beginners. Free Code Camp is good as well, but that's a lot longer, and that's oriented towards like full stack web development, not necessarily Python. Do you know any websites that are good for exercises?
Code.org maybe. I know there's a bunch of tutorials that are built in that, maybe a bunch of external resources as well, if you're curious.
What's the website?
Code.org.
Code.org?
Yep. Yeah, so definitely do check that out. If you do Google coding tutorials, I'm sure you'll also find more resources as well.
Lord Demir, Colton, are you working as a developer or is CS50 your full-time job? CS50 is my full-time job. Not currently doing any side development work. This is taking enough time. And it's interesting because the game stuff is what I like to do. If I were to work as a developer, I'd probably try to do something either in games, which is like my passion, or more pragmatically React full stack web development using React or using whatever modern technologies people are in the market for. Lord Demir, the other sir to your left, I never got his introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself once again?
Sure. Once again, my name is Kareem Zidane, and I am a preceptor here at Harvard. I work with CS50 full-time as well. I do work mainly on Cloud9, the IDE, CS50 IDE.
Oh, that's true. We didn't talk about all the tools that you've written. You've written so many tools for us now.
Yeah, so I do work on the CS50 IDE primarily, but I also work on all of the DevOps stuffs that we have. So I do work, use Travis CI to continuously integrate and deploy our apps, which we have a huge number of them. We have a GitHub organization on GitHub. If you go to github.com/CS50, you can find all of our open source repositories there, and you can certainly see contributions from a lot of people. Yeah.
Primarily Kareem Zidane. Well, also David does. David and Brian do a lot of the work probably too, right?
Yeah.
And Dan Coffey does a good sizable amount, and he'll be talking with us tomorrow on Draw 50. Checkio.org looks like Bastavon put in there. What is the road to be a DevOps? Should I learn Java or Python for it?
I don't think it's tied to a very specific language. So yeah, DevOps, are really not tied to any one specific language, because you could have projects in Java or Python or a number of other languages, but you would still need to do testing as appropriate. Like we could use different languages even for testing if you want to, or different tools. You need to be familiar with the tools such as Travis CI to do stuff like continuous integration and deployment, but it's not really tied to one or two languages.
Cool. Incidentally, Unity's audio mixer is super awesome. Just as an idea for your game stream, it'd be cool to see some ideas in that area. If you have any, perhaps a rhythm game or something along the lines of what Braid did with music that synchronizes with time. It's been a while since I've seen Braid. I have it, but I think I played it like 5 or 6 years ago. I did have an idea to potentially make like a Guitar Hero kind of game, or like a using like the keyboard or something. So we might be able to visit that. That'd be pretty cool.
This would be fun.
Yeah. Asli, you want to read Asli Nuwanda3333's comment right there?
Okay. It's delusional, says, what's your academic background, guys?
Kareem the Dream. Academic background. I studied computer science at Saddleback College in California for a couple of years before moving out here to work for CS50 full-time.
I did study computer science as well online. I did not study computer science formally. So most of my computer science knowledge and programming knowledge are actually from online resources like CS50 and others.
Same. Like Jenkins, Docker, etc., says Lord Demir 24.
Definitely, yes. If Jenkins is what you're using, you should probably familiarize yourself with Jenkins. Also, if you're using Docker, we happen to be using Docker in a lot of applications. So yeah, that's certainly something that you should look at and learn more about.
Cool, cool. All right, well, we are approaching we're at 2 hours, 5 minutes now, so I think we're gonna wrap the stream up now.
All right.
So thanks so much, everybody who tuned in today for Kareem's awesome sort of tutorial and thorough introduction to Travis CI and deploying apps using GitHub Pages and CI/CD.
Yeah.
It was a good stream, good time. We had a good time. And join us again tomorrow for Draw 50 with Dan Coffey.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.